In our main topic this week here on Mastering Dungeons, we are going to look at the DM's Guild as it turns 10 years old. DM's Guild will become a tween in January. It will be 10 years old as of January 11th, I think. So let's look back at a history of the site, the impact that it's had on creators, on D&D, and on our hobby. Let's look at the current state of the DM's Guild and the lessons we might apply to similar future platforms. So what brought this topic to your attention, Teos?
Well, it was a great video by Trekiros, who has such a knack for making awesome, interesting videos with his little Modron cartoon figure that he puts on the screen. And he had talked to a number of us on Discord about the concept of writing this video. And I know he gathered information from a lot of different creators who had been involved in the DM's Guild so that he could kind of marry together his understanding of the platform from someone who's been on it and had success on it with folks who'd been around for a longer time. And that video, we've got a link in our show notes, or you can just look on YouTube for Trekiros, Rise and Fall of the DM's Guild. Does a neat job of telling a story, mostly accurate, I would say. I think I have a little bits, we'll talk about this. There's some parts where I disagree, but am I right? Who knows? But looking at the history of the platform, and has it died, right? Has it now fallen irrecoverably from its heights? And part of what he does that's really neat is he pulls together a website at roll-history.vercel.app, link in our show notes, also on his video, where he gathers historic data through internet archives of all the sales that happen. So it's things like which are the top seller lists off of that front page. And you can look this up for various different rules and sort of page through the history of the DM's Guild top selling products, which is really neat.
Mm-hmm. So two things. Mm-hmm. The first thing is I didn't know if I wanted to get into this discussion because we are a part of this discussion.
Yeah.
And like you said that Trekiros reached out to you, did not reach out to me, at least as far as I know. Mm-hmm. So there are things that I know that I will not be able to discuss because of NDA reasons.
Same. Mm-hmm.
There are things that I will discuss reluctantly. But, being a part of this article makes it, or this video, this whole topic, makes it challenging to talk about without your own bias reaching out or reaching through. But we're going to push forward anyway. If Teos and I come to blows, that's okay. We're one big happy family here, or one very small, generally happy family. I think the chances
of blows is very low, but we'll find out.
Well, I am a little ornery today, Teos.
So, excellent.
It may be a one-sided fight. The other thing I want to say is, before we start talking about the DM's Guild, I really want to remind people a little bit about the history of D&D licensing between 1974 and when the DM's Guild started. Because just looking at the DM's Guild in a vacuum leaves out a great deal of the positive of it.
True. That
needs to be said before we just focus on what I think is a lot of negative. Because the goals of the guild obviously changed. But one of the goals of it was give people the ability to and the platform to create content, not just licensed D&D content, but using IP.
Yeah.
And for those of us who lived through the days where first we couldn't even make D&D products and sell them because we would have been sued by TSR.
Yeah.
To those who used the open gaming license of 3rd edition, to those who maybe wanted to use the more restrictive license of 4th edition but couldn't, to come back around to 5th edition and see this platform, this license, this opening of the use of IP to tell our own stories is probably for me the biggest story of D&D, period.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah, and if I
Not
could,
fifth edition, not just
yeah.
the biggest story
Interesting.
ever.
Okay, I love that. I don't know if I'd go with
Yeah.
that, but I won't fight you over it in that I think that's a very reasonable position to make. And for folks who don't kind of grasp that, like with the open gaming license in third edition, the kind of typical thing you were expected to do is to create a product in print and sell it to gaming stores, right? Which involves a 50% distribution cut just at the store level and another 25% through the distributor, probably. So you're kind of getting 25% of sales and if the cover price, but you have all the costs, right? And what often happened, and especially happened when 3.5 came out, was that a ton of you had no transparency where you're just shipping things out to various stores hoping it'll sell. And when it didn't, especially because 3.5 came out and invalidated all of it, all those books didn't sell and got sent back or pulped or whatever, depending on what the agreement was with the distributor. And companies lost a lot of money on that, right? If they were even making much to begin with. So there were very few sort of, I think, big success stories. There might have been volume moving or whatever, but it was quite the struggle to go through that with the open gaming license. As PDFs became more popular and sites like drive-through really started feeling more more prevalent, more recognized, then that was an easier thing to do. But it's hard in our minds to just remember how vastly different everything was, right? Third edition, you're online with like Yahoo groups, not online. There's no social media. There's no, this sort of idea of that many people all discussing what product to buy just doesn't really exist at that same level.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to start with that and then work our way through what the DMsGuild did. And so knowing that we were going to discuss this, I went back and looked at my own history with the DMsGuild because it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I can't even remember what I worked on 2 weeks ago. And when the DMsGuild launched on January 11th, 2016, I had 4 products up there. One was called 5 Temples of the Earth Mother, which I created through a partnership with Encoded Designs, a Buffalo-based group that we put together a nice product with I'm not a layout person, not an artist, not a graphic designer. So we had folks doing all of these different things. And then one thing that the video never mentioned was Adventurers League. Because all of the Adventurers League adventures that had been published up until that point were put up on the DMsGuild for sale. So I had 4 products, 3 Adventurers League products, and that 5 Temples of the Earth Mother specifically made for the DMsGuild. And I put in our show notes that my first day of sales, I sold 15 of the season 1 adventure, 8 copies of the season 2 adventure, and 4 copies of the season 3 adventure for a total of $30 on that first day.
Nice.
Very, very exciting, and something that I never thought I would be able to do, see, or ever even contemplate in my lifetime.
And what's interesting is how AL dominated compared to 5 Temples of the Earth Mother. I just checked its gold. Your first 3 AL adventures are far better than gold.
Yeah. Yeah. And so this also changed the Adventurers League whole modus operandi, because if you remember, initially you could not play Adventurers League adventures at home. You could play them at stores, you could play them at conventions. This then changed to you sold them, you could buy them on the adventures on DMsGuild, and you could play them anywhere. And this was, a change which I assume was at least partially implemented because of the availability of the adventures on the DMsGuild.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting with AL adventures. don't sell now like they used to. And this is the kind of thing that's always so hard, depending on where you came in on all of this DM's Guild process, what you know, what you see, what you hold to be true. Adventures League, we can take that a step back and say, before Adventures League, say third edition, which people talk about, all these great organized play programs, most of us got paid nothing for those, right? It was all volunteer work. Then we would get paid some amount for things like Living Forgotten Realms, which I think eventually became around $500, right, for writing an adventure.
Yeah.
And then they paid us that $500 and put things on the DM's Guild, and then eventually it was just whatever you got from your DM's Guild royalties. So some of us really we felt like we were making out like bandits to get paid $500 and get something royalty-wise. But AL sold like hotcakes in the early days of the DM's Guild, and even for, I'd say, the first 3-4 years, you made really good sales. And still, it tends to the early adventures outsell a lot of things that I do. And if I just look at a monthly report, I do far better on my 2 AL adventures than I do on the things that I created myself. And I think that's still true. Like, I'll look at let me see. I can pull up from my own records something like September of this year. My Adventures League products are Mithril and Platinum, and so this September I had 9 sales and 4 sales, and that is higher than the number of sales for the other things that I have. Right? It's not huge, 9 sales and 4 sales, but that beats out the 2 or 3 that I had for everything else of mine. And that kind of ratio is roughly equivalent, right? I can go to years when I was getting 46 sales of one of those adventures, and I look at something I made and I had, 10 sales and things like that.
Yeah. And to be clear, Wizards of the Coast did not have to do this. Wizards of this, when we wrote these early Adventures League adventures, we signed the contract. They paid us upfront $500, and that was it. That was all. They gave them out to game stores, conventions, and it was out. When they decided to put them on the DM's Guild, they did not have to, in any way, shape, or form, give any royalties to any of the adventure writers. Right. And the fact that they did that shows a good faith gesture on the part of the team there to do right by the adventure writers.
Yeah, and so, when I was fortunate through all of the various things that I do across the years, right? Talk to various Wizards staff before the DM's Guild or even D&D Classics before it ever existed about the idea of having something like this. And this is an idea that was talked about by many different people in many different ways. And sometimes, as with the OGL, one person will be credited for being the person who did this. And often there is somebody who pushed it beyond the goal line. But I know that this was something talked about forever. And people would talk about, staff members would talk about, and I would talk to them about, wouldn't it be great if we had something that was like the Apple iPhone store, right? Like, where you could go and get software and see, and, what if that was, you could buy a Paladin class or buy and we would throw these ideas around at conventions or other places and consider how that might be. But what was interesting with the DM's Guild is you might be tempted to imagine that, well, this was all, of course, so we could make crazy money. And it never was that. Every conversation I had, now there were some conversations that were saying, hey, look, like what happened with Pathfinder, where the OGL sort of empowered a competitor. Wouldn't that be a lot better if we could have gotten a cut of it, right? Mm-hmm. Have them compete, but get something out of it instead of just free use all our rules and create a version of them and profit and create competition. That's not so cool. But aside from that angle, it was really that there was a look back at sort of the way that in various previous editions, people would be on the internet creating cool things. And what if you could pull that together and have all these people in a place and do it? And it was a recognition also of when Wizards doesn't help creators, that looks bad and for reasons, right? So having a way that we are actually trying to help you create, trying to put something, enable you to be recognized and found for what you've created would be neat. What they didn't expect was success at this level for any creator. or for the platform itself. They thought it would be like the equivalent of gathering everybody together from Usenet and posting on Usenet forums and, rec.games.frp. whatever, and just sharing your creations, not that you would become blah, blah, blah press.
Yep.
And that you would have a social media presence and a YouTube channel. That was never imagined, by anybody that I spoke with.
Yeah, and that's the joy, but that's also the challenge of these sorts of things, is it can make perfect sense in one era, in one spotlight, but as it moves away from its original intent or its original design, it becomes either bigger than it was intended to be, or different than it was intended to be. And I also want to point out that we say Wizards of the Coast, but Wizards of the Coast is made up of a group of people. So I'm not saying corporations are people, because that's not true.
Right.
But corporations are made up of people. And these people who are part of this group make decisions. And you can sometimes point to an individual person who does things for better, for worse, for greatness, for horror. And sometimes Teos and I know these people. And so we are also in this awkward position of trying to say Wizards of the Coast when we mean person A or person B.
Sally.
I saw multiple people claim to have created the DMs Guild. And one person said it while the other person was in the room, and they looked at them and went, what are you talking about? One person was the person who concepted it and pushed it through Wizards. The other person was the coder at one bookshelf who created it, right? Who did the coding to make it work. These are both creators of the DMs Guild, but not the sole creators, as Teos said, but important people within the conversation.
Yeah.
So I want to point that out as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to take us through, now that we've talked about this, Trekiros' video?
Yeah. So it's great. He highlights that it's been 10 years and he wants to revisit the platform's history. So he talks about, first of all, very important, the first 2 years of 5th edition, there's no OGL, there's no DMs Guild, right? And so it's this weird closed system. Everything has to be done with a direct agreement with Wizards if you wanted to create, right? So we see things like Kobold Press as, being contracted to write Tyranny of Dragons, things like that. They can't just create a thing. But once the DMs Guild comes out and then they sort of seed it with an initial round of people, you and I were part of that, where they reached out and said, hey, we want to have cool things out there. So write for this brand new system. And we all had to think, is that worth my time? I don't know. I guess I'll try something. and so they start up the DMs Guild, and the whole concept of it is this is a place where you can publish with our IP. So when it starts, you can do Forgotten Realms, and later they open up Eberron and Spelljammer and all kinds of different things. But you can do that, right? But you can't write for Dark Sun because it's not there. It's only the things that they've chosen to open up. And you get to use all that IP and do what you want with it, which is really cool. But you are locked into this platform. So when I create a DMs Guild product, it means that the entirety of that product, any little bit of it, it's all locked into that platform. I can't, sell it on a crowdfunder as something that you could add on. I can't distribute it in some other way. It's all locked up there. And some people will break these rules from time to time, but that is the legal agreement that you're signing up for. And in the early days of the guild, this could be pretty significant. And we should say the royalties are 50% to the creator. The majority of that remainder of 50% goes to OBS, and then a smaller part to Wizards of the Coast. And you and I talked about on our show where Ben Riggs had some data leaked to him, and he shared it on his podcast that in 2019, which is probably around the peak of the DMs Guild, this was a sizable revenue stream for Wizards of the Coast, though it was never imagined that it would be like that. That 50% cut Again, better than if you were doing print sales and probably modeled somewhat after that. It is lower than what you can get through on Drive-Thru, which is also owned by OBS, One Bookshelf. So on Drive-Thru RPG, you get a 65% royalty, 70% if you decide to be exclusive to the platform. And you're getting an exclusive 50% when you do DM's Guild, right? So you're giving up a fair amount, both of the royalty and of being able to exist on other places. But this is a trend that we see on all the other community content programs that later came out through the Drive-Thru sort of DM's Guild system. So World of Darkness has a community content program, Call of Cthulhu, and many others. All of those give you 50%. So it's a sort of tried and true on their end approach. Thoughts here?
Yeah, that's pretty much standard knowledge, cut and dried.
Mm-hmm,
not much to argue about or debate yet. Trekiros does say that many people he spoke to only knew the DM's Guild was even in existence because of Matt Mercer's Blood Hunter and Gunslinger supplements that he released there.
That's interesting.
And so right away, we get this is where anybody can do anything, but what's the bestseller going to be? The super famous YouTube Game Master is the one that ends up getting most of the sales, which shows you how important marketing is in anything.
Yeah. I mean, it's right. It's those those higher laws of reality, right? That you're confronted with at times. You make this gorgeous product, and Matt has just done a very plain cover and just trying to put out a little something for fans. And then he has to defend himself back then on Twitter of, hey, I'm not trying to make anyone look bad. I really just thought it would be cool to share this. And I think he originally had like a price for it, and then it either went to charity or free, because he's like, I wasn't trying to make money. I was just trying to be a part of this fun thing, and had no idea that, I'd have to defend myself over this. Right.
Mm-hmm. So right away, we're getting not political, but we're getting this social dynamic anger in something that was not supposed to be that.
Right. Yeah, it wasn't envisioned as anything that would create that kind of drama. Trekiros has a fun thing where he talks about how the only thing that ever unseats the Blood Hunter and Gunslinger supplements in terms of overall sales, and these are sales volumes, not dollars, right? Because of the way that Blood Hunter and Gunslinger are priced. But it is a Ner'zhul's Dungeon Master Toolkit by Stephen Williams. And he says it's a really interesting supplement to have dethroned them because it has very low production values. It's more of sort of like the creator's notes and ideas rather than a polished product. But somehow it ends up just catching the attention of enough people that it does really well for a period of time, and is sort of the only thing that beats out Matt's creations. And then Trekiros talks about how the DM's Guild, he sees it as being very important in launching a number of creators. MT Black, Kelsey Dion, James Introcaso, Justice Armand, James Hake. He names all of these as being sort of a lot of people getting to know them through the DM's Guild. And I had to pause here, right? I'm like, yeah, it's probably true for some people, but a lot of these, and certainly Kelsey, I think she really stood out by not just making creations, but talking in videos that she launched on her channel about these creations. I think that's what really helped her rise. Also running a great mailing list. So it was something beyond just the writing a popular adventure there. MT Black for sure, like he was one of the top 3 creators. And what's interesting is of those top 3 creators, with Jeff Stevens and JV Perry, like, they were, MT sort of got the most attention, right? And I think was doing really well. Probably one of the few people who could sort of say, like, I basically am getting a salary through the DM's Guild for a few years there. But it's really hard to get this sort of fame. And I would say that even somebody like Justice, how many people you and I knew Justice, right? And companies brought people like this into work on their products. But James Hake had been writing for EN World, for Geek and Sundry, right? Works with Matt Mercer on the guide with Green Ronin for Critical Role. Like there's so many other things that happen here to promote these various people, and so it's more than just getting known through these through the DMs Guild. I think. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's all correct. There were some people that were asked to contribute to the DMs Guild to give it some reputation as a place to go to get good stuff. And that's why a setup like this, right, at the mall, you need the little boutique stores, but you also need
Yeah.
right the J.C. Penney, you need the
Yeah.
anchor stores.
Yeah.
And so, they wanted, they being Wizards of the Coast, wanted creators who they knew already to come in and create content that would lend legitimacy to everyone there.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the people that this video says, like you said, like James Introcaso had already been working for Wizards of the Coast. My name and image was put up on the screen in the video as if the DMs Guild was like launched me anywhere, and it didn't. Right?
Yeah.
I am very thankful for the DMs Guild, but I was doing work long before that, and was asked to join to help create some content that would be seen as useful and well designed.
Yeah. And there's a real mixed piece here with some of the creators. Like I think, Empty Black. Well, we'll talk more about this, but that idea of how community or Wizards recognizes creators is a very uneven thing. Even someone might think, oh, so and so has a success story, and they may disagree with you on that from their perspective.
Right.
But
yeah,
one of the things that also ties into this, it ties directly into notoriety and having an existing audience, but or developing one on the platform, and that is the issue of quality. And Trekiros discusses how the platform at times really tried to be a place of quality. One of the ways it does this is having various banners up there that show you the new thing, but the top thing. And these different banners played big roles. For example, when the Guild Adept program got frozen, James Introcaso was frozen as the #1 Adept product with the thing he wrote with his dad. And imagine the sales impact of being stuck on this banner at #1 that is no longer really a functioning banner, but just being there for years of like the first thing people see, right? That is a great outcome that is just sort of fortunate, right? Like out of nowhere, it's just something that happens and you end up being just frozen at #1 for a really long time, getting lots of sales off of that. But there was this attempt to have quality. And this is a very hard thing to achieve, right? Very few people leave reviews. Reviews, when they're left, are often negative, right? They're talking about that one thing they didn't like or wish the person had done differently. That's often what has motivated people to leave comments. In fact, there was a time when there was this group that would buy all the AL adventures, and they would talk about this publicly. They would buy up AL adventures and leave a 1-star review because they hated AL.
Yeah.
Which every creator I ever talked to said, please do that for me. Please buy my adventure and give it 1 star. I could use the sales.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hate buys are just as valuable as love buys.
Mm-hmm.
And
partly because this rating didn't really somewhat matter, right? It was never big enough to nothing not nothing, but it was very hard for quality to really stand out. Certain things would sell in a certain equation of sales per time, and that's dollar sales per time that would then drive them to be in banners, and that could be a self-fulfilling thing for a while to keep you in that banner. But other than that, it was really hard to know what was quality or to find the kind of thing you would want. If you wanted a certain type of product, trying to find that is still very hard today.
Yeah, and it's the issue that we go through in all aspects of our life. Right? Whether it's buying a toaster at the store or it becomes a game in itself. It becomes an advertising game. And trying to release something at the right time where it would be on that banner or at the top of the list. And it became less and less to do with the quality of the product,
Mm-hmm.
but even just this whole business, people don't know who the writers are.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Nobody cared that I wrote on a certain thing. It was just, oh, cool, this looks good. I bought it. Uh, and
Maybe even
names
opened it.
were maybe even opened it, unless you were a Matt Mercer,
Right.
right?
Right.
Unless you were a YouTuber who
Mm-hmm.
had a huge following. And we still
Yeah.
see this today
Yeah.
with some really, really large Kickstarters
Yeah.
that quality aside, they could be great quality, could be low quality. You don't know because the
Yeah.
product hasn't been made yet, but you
Yep.
have 1 million YouTube
Yep.
subscribers. So therefore, your Kickstarter is going to do well.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the attempts to kind of help with quality, and I think that it's interesting, something it's really hard to remember, is the DMs Guild opened up with a template. And the template was, a very simple Word document that, you put your title and your whatever, and a lot, if you had looked at the products back then, they were all these very simple things. A few of them had nice covers, like your Temple of the Earth Mother has a very nice cover, but most of them were pretty plain. It's the kind of thing that when you don't know anything about layout, or you don't have a great eye, like I don't. That's why my wife looks at all my products and fixes them. But they were just sort of, I don't know, a font in a certain color and a kind of image, and you're lucky if you get that. And
Mhm.
there was this push to want to have it look better. Mike Shea says he does not recall this, but I recall Mike Shea sort of saying, like, why do these AL adventures look so bad? Like, there's just this plain text, like it's the official program, pretty this up, which eventually they did. And they also did the thing of creating the Adepts Program. And this was the concept of I think several things: recognizing talent, supporting a hardback adventure release with almost official accessories, right? And to show the rest of the guild what could be possible, which was an interesting thing to try to do all of these goals at once. Trekiros says it felt less like Wizards supporting community and more like Wizards choosing who was in a cool kids club. What do you think of that, Shawn? Because you were an adept.
Yeah. So over the years, I've been on both sides of these so-called cool kids clubs, right? I've been in them and I've been on the outside of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a social thing rather than a quality thing. Um, I I wanted Wizards to see this guild as achieving the goals that it had set for it.
Mm.
And one of the goals was, we at Wizards can't publish everything, but we know people need more content.
Right.
So let's find a group of people who we either have worked with directly or whose work we've seen
Mm-hmm.
to become the people that would at least start in the right direction of adding this content.
Yeah.
And so the Guild Adepts would get early copies of whatever the yearly campaign was to give us time to get content ready to put up on the Guild when it was ready to release. And if I was not in the Guild Adepts, I would say that's cool. If
Mm-hmm.
I am in the Guild Adepts, I say, okay, that's cool. Uh, so this is the part of the video where I started to try to negate these feelings I have of being attacked
Uh-huh.
for doing something that there were times when I did not have the time, the energy, and the brain space to work on these projects.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that the guild would likely be a better place for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I pushed through and did them. Did I get along with every guild adept that I had to work with? For me, yes.
Mm.
But were there issues? Constantly.
Sure.
What was everyone that was named a guild adept should have been in the program? Definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
Should there have been other people who were making great stuff that could have been invited? Absolutely. Were there some great creators that would have been horrible in the Guild Adepts program? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
because the Guild Adepts program was about working with people, compromising a lot
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that everyone got their voice heard, that everyone got a chance to contribute. It's like any group project that you've ever done,
Mm-hmm.
whether at work or school or
Yep.
whatever. You often have the same couple of people doing a lot of the work, whereas other people might not have done as much of the work but still gotten the credit.
Yeah.
Sometimes that was me. Sometimes I could only contribute a little bit
Mm-hmm.
or not contribute up to the standard that I had hoped.
Mm-hmm.
But other people picked me up.
Yep.
Sometimes I was the one rewriting whole chapters at the last minute. So, right, you can look at it in a lot of ways. From the inside, it wasn't like popping champagne and
Right.
sailing off on my yacht. And the problem with things like this is there's no perfect way to do it, and everyone will find the flaws, especially looking at it through their own lens of why am I not getting X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
I have a lot of feelings about this.
I bet you do. I bet you do. I have feelings about it too, having never been.
I know you
do. But I have more feelings for what Wizards had communicated. And part of the problem is this is a partnership.
Yeah.
OBS is the platform, and they're doing a lot of that platform work and hosting and all these kinds of fees. And then you have Wizards, where largely what they're doing is marketing, right? Drawing people there because they don't have to run the site. So they just, have to do some policing or whatever. But one of the things they chose to do is to say, hey, we're going to look for talent and find them on the DMs Guild.
Yeah.
And there's very little evidence of them doing that. And one of the most interesting things was that the top sellers on the DMs Guild for a number of years, especially as it was coming up, as the Adepts were getting started, were pretty obvious. It was three people that were always knocking out of the park. And at the top of that was MT Black. And they named the first group of adepts and he's not on there. And they named the second group and he's not on there. And everybody's like, what is happening? Like either Wizards is completely blind or there is some bizarre thing that we're not hearing about that is the reason. And then finally, like MT gets joined or gets to join. And the other top sellers don't. And there are any number of people who could say, well, wait a minute, you told me this program was about this thing and I never get recognition. And I think there's an amazing moment, like beautiful from a history perspective, of Candlekeep Mysteries being written and bringing in a huge number of people to write it. And where did those people come from? Chris Perkins tells us he picked them from Twitter. and it's like, right. And, while it's great to see people from all kinds of different areas come in, I mean, you said this thing and you didn't do it. And then you see where some of certain people came in that were, had never written on the DMs Guild and got to be an adept. And sometimes they were quickly rushed into a project so that they would have something on the DMs Guild. And that was just, it was really rough. And not to dwell on my point isn't to dwell on those things, but rather to say all of these systems, they create they have the impetus to create these kinds of situations and problems, right? And it was true of AL as well, because with AL, you could see the first adventure is going to sell really well. Well, that Sean Merwin guy gets to do it all the time or most of the time. And
for sure,
the good news is you were doing that really well before there were any great sales. So people could say, well, he is absolutely killing it. So good on him, right? But someone could have said, I'm an AL admin. I think I'll write adventure number 1 because it'll get me tons of money. Like it's literally money in my pocket, right? And those decisions could be made that you could say, I want to write the big hinge adventure where the adventure, goes big, or the one that has the big named villain, or the end, because those sell well. So these kinds of systems are always tricky, and somebody with a real steady and good hand has to manage them, or things get out of whack, right? And we even saw it with there was a program where, AL were the official adventures, but then also allowed on the platform were convention adventures through the CCC program. And how that got approved was another possible, so there's just, and again, not to get into all the details and all the things that I know or but it's just a problem when all these systems have these kinds of situations where it's difficult. And we see that, and we'll talk a little about this, D&D Beyond, right? Who gets to be on D&D Beyond it's as much vibes as it is a process, which is why the process isn't written down. Right.
Yeah. I mean, when there are humans involved, you're going to have all of these issues. Yeah. The only thing worse than having humans involved is taking humans out of the equation.
Right? That's a good point. I love that.
So we could go totally AI.
Yeah.
We could go the total AI route. And I'm sure that would be perfect. And that's what I mean about right, people.
Yeah.
I'm sure at some point, someone at Wizards of the Coast said, oh, we have all of this data. We have all of this content. Let's find the great designers using this information. When we review all the top sellers and we'll look at all this. And then who are you going to pay to do that? How are you going to figure that out? Forever, the biggest scam in creative writing was, oh, send us, we published so-and-so literary journal. Send us your poem and send us your short story and, a $10 entry fee, and we will get your work published in this contest. And so I could definitely see somebody saying, yes, we're going to do this. I could also see somebody saying, well, let's tell them that, and then they will go there and they will. Yeah. But even then, it's not like they were promising fame and fortune. Right. They were just saying, this is a place where we could look for it. And people get their hopes up. People,
yes,
and understandably so. Yeah. People get their hopes up, like, this is the break I've been looking for. Yeah. But this is not a DM's Guild issue. This is a technology issue. This is a society issue, because the first people that wrote D&D blogs, they were there at the start. They did decent enough work and they reaped the benefits. And then we had the D&D YouTube, and they were the first ones there, and they had just enough cachet to take advantage of that. And now everyone else is hoping, but hoping against reason.
Yeah. And this concept of what creators think they know or believe they know, what they're being told, it's a big part of these programs, because it looks like, just like being on YouTube or being anywhere, or writing for D&D or anything, from the outside it can look like everything is amazing. And in terms of drive-through sales or OBS, DM's Guild sales, it can look like everything is gold or everything is platinum or everything's adamantine, when the reality is the chance of a product reaching gold level in sales was 4% for a regular person, is what Trekiros puts together, 70% for an adept, right? And it shows you that difference. But it doesn't mean that it's guaranteed. It's just a way better chance. And I think what people saw wasn't these numbers, but what they saw was, boy, these adept products are doing really well. Clearly, there's bank in that. But also, I must be able to hit gold too if I work hard enough. And initially, what drives a gold product is a mix of many things, but over time it starts being a kind of arms race of layout, cover, how you set up your product page together. And at first that's really nice. And Trekiros calls 2017 to 2019 the golden age of the guild. High sales, escalating product quality. We see people, like Ann Gregerson creates Monsters Loot, the Uncaged series, Monster Manual Expanded, any number of things you can pick as sort of your favorites from this era. But people are really kind of like getting noticed from these things and getting work from these things. And they're clearly making some really nice sales in some of these areas. While other people are like, I made this cool thing and it has a cool cover, and boy, I might even be known in various circles as a creator. I haven't been able to hit gold. And that's the reality, right? So the golden age I think is a lot, and something I'd add to Trekiros' video is the golden age is really about the fact that across the guild, there are a lot of sales. It doesn't mean any individual creator is guaranteed success. And that's true then or now, right? Mike Shea and Scott Fitzgerald Gray wrote a Spelljammer supplement. It was whenever 2 years ago, something like that. It didn't do particularly well, right? And so it's so hard to port your audience there, right? Trekiros sees the DMs Guild as being sort of the place to get third-party content. And I don't know that it's so much that it replaces things, but it just emerges onto the scene as sort of a place that a lot of people are aware of. I wouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people are aware of it. A lot of people are going there and buying various things. And he feels the best content seems to rise. I'm not sure that that's really what's happening. He also says creators are usually not competing with established creators. I think it's more that, again, it's like that production value can really rise ahead. And I remember talking to a couple of creators where I really liked the cover art that I saw. And I thought, I should make a product. I would love to have a cover like this cover. And I start talking to them, and they were great people, right? Like, I would highly recommend these people in every way possible. But they told me, I kind of have a bunch of money and I just wanted to have a platinum product. So I paid this amount for the cover. And I'm like, oh, wow. And they're like, yeah, no, I'm not going to be profitable. I'm just, and so it's like, oh, well, that's how you became a platinum seller. Like, you paid an incredible amount of money to do this. And again, they're a wonderful person. I have nothing against them or their strategy. But what it did was distort things, right? To where when I sat down to say, okay, I'll do a collaboration, I'll write something myself, I'll buy, I actually will never make money. And I think a lot of people didn't even do that math. They just spent the money. And so there's this artificial sense of success. Things look successful. And of course, OBS is plenty happy. Whether your product makes 5 sales or 100, if there are enough of them, it doesn't matter. The volume of it is sort of this golden age in a lot of ways. Any thoughts about that sort of era of the golden age era?
Yeah, this is going to sound odd, but I really didn't pay much attention to the DMs Guild.
Interesting.
For all this content I had up there, I was just focused on designing the thing, whether it was Adventures League content before the guild even started, if it was content for the guild program or the Guild Adept program, I was doing the editing, I was doing writing, I was doing development. Other people were handling the art. Other people were handling the layout, usually Rich Lescaflair. And then it would go up on the DMs Guild, and I would be like, okay, cool. I get 2% of sales because there were 12 people working on it. And so I don't even think I probably have put myself 5 products on the DMs Guild. Everything else was through some other avenue. So it was never about that for me, which is a real blessing. It is, so I recognized when sales plummeted. I recognized when things became trendy, but I wasn't super focused on hitting the right button at the right time.
I think it was interesting for a lot of creators that maybe had been only freelancing to suddenly realize, well, getting sort of residual pay is pretty good, right? Where added to your survival strategy of getting the next freelance job is also, hey, the DMs Guild just came in with, whatever it might be, right? And maybe it's enough to cover one of your utility bills, right? Oh, that's actually kind of nice to have these residual sales. And I think it helped a lot of creators think about, well, so maybe in this era where it's a lot easier to do this, I should have a PDF store on my site for the things that I didn't create locked into the DMs Guild. And in fact, hey, maybe I shouldn't be locked into the DMs Guild because then I can get 100% of that PDF sale, minus the credit card transaction by putting something on my website. Oh, that's actually really good, right? Or launch a Kickstarter or any of these number of things. And I think the DMs Guild really helped a lot of creators embrace this larger approach to things that only a few creators had tapped into before this.
Yeah, and it really does show people what goes into making a product who might not have otherwise realized how difficult it is to take your group home game notes and even get it into a layout, not even thinking of art, not even thinking of getting it into a format where people can actually comprehend it,
Yeah.
and how much work that is.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, what do you think? Do we want to zoom through some of this, or do we want to try to talk more about this in a second episode? We kind of the next bit here is kind of the post-pandemic era.
Yeah,
Um,
why don't we stop here? We'll
yeah,
come back to it and we'll finish up our discussion of the DMs Guild and this particular video's discussion of it.
love it, love it.
All right. Thank you, Teos, for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you,
And
Shawn.
thank you to all our listeners out there. Uh, Many of our listeners help us out through our Patreon, which is at patreon.com/masteringdnd. We have three tiers of support. We have our wonderful and plentiful Master of Dungeon supporters. Thank you all for listening and for the support. We have our Master of Realm supporters, some wonderful folks who get their names listed in our show notes. And we have the Master of the Multiverse Patreons or patrons who get Teos wearing a Santa hat and me destroying their names like only I can. So thank you so much, Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshops, Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, Dave Bastiensen, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Bosjan from Duality Press, Calvin Bridges of Alos, Brobo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimbleco, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Vidwalcles G, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ben Heisler and Paige Laitman, Sean Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG Podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JR of the Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Cormandy, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Jaron from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Mengi, Annabie Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacle Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prunner from Croatia, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simons, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games, Jeff Stevens at jeffstevensgames.com, Josh and Lee Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talos the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from the D&D and TV podcast, Tres, Ryan Truk, Joe Tyler, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Zach Types, and Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you so much for listening and being a patron of our show. Again, if you would like to get more of this goodness in your life, you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd. You can also help us out by going and giving us a review wherever you listen to this show, or go to YouTube at youtube.com/@masteringdungeons and give us a subscribe or a like or a comment or thumbs up and all the stuff. Teos, I know that the holiday season is here, but what do you have going on the socials?
Absolutely nothing. I'm
Wait,
enjoying the eggnog. Maybe I'll get something out before the end of the year. But I'm having fun. Focused on cracking the sun and enjoying the family. So, how about
yeah.
you? Where people find you? What are you up to?
I am up to absolutely everything, but nothing that
Mhm.
is relevant to this show. So you
Or
can
can be
find me on the
shared.
socials at Sean Merwin. You can follow the podcast at Mastering D&D on the various socials. And of course, you can always go to that YouTube channel and see us as well as hear us. So, Teos, we are heading toward the holiday season. What are we going to do now?
Craft my extensive rules for building a snowman monster and publish it on the DMs Guild and set it at the price of $500. I'm going to make the big monies.
I'm going to go make a potion of eggnog.
Mmm.
Mm.